Hello, folks. Welcome to Humanity Now. Today we are speaking with Dan Mullens. Hello, Dan. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Nice and relaxed.
Great. Good to hear.
Enjoying.
Awesome. Can you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Sure. I love to read books. I'm a bit of a bookworm. I've been reading my whole life. Started since I was 12 years old. Um, I turned to books when I was a teenager. Started to read about psychology and philosophy, and I also taught myself how to read music, uh, so I can play the drums, which is sitting right here behind me. In my early 20s, I joined the seminary. I was going to be a Catholic priest, and I left uh, because I didn't really agree with the lifetime commitment to celibacy that the Catholic Church requires. I was too preoccupied with starting a family and having kids of my own. So, plus, I was too involved in wanting to be a drummer and joining bands and playing out there, and I kind of felt that vocation would have restricted me. My personality is too colorful for that. So, uh, and yeah, I've been a very avid book reader my whole life. I have about 2 years worth of college under my belt, but no official degree. So that's kind of where my mindset is at. I like to study worldly questions
That's
and
great.
dissect the complex.
Now, I found you from TikTok. Can you tell the audience a bit about your TikTok account and stuff?
Yeah, I started out on Twitter as a socialist guy, and then I moved to TikTok. I joined TikTok just to stay in touch with my nephews, and I thought, hey, this is kind of a nice platform. So I opened up another TikTok called A Socialist Guy. It's the same as my Twitter account. And I wanted to promote educational content and dispel some misconceptions about socialism, as I had discovered as well that I was misinformed about socialism my entire life. So I just kind of want to provide educational content.
Right on. What politicized you?
I've always been kind of political. Uh, I joined the seminary in my early 20s and had the privilege of meeting a lot of people from around the world. Uh, a lot of missionaries would come and give us little talks about what was going on in their countries and how they were viewing the United States of America, and it wasn't exactly in such friendly terms. So I got a little political uh, from that. What really politicized me was the World Trade Center being attacked in 2001. I had known enough about U.S. foreign policy to know that we weren't viewed as very friendly throughout the rest of the world. And I kind of suspected that it was an act of retaliation. And so I got involved in studying politics a little deeper than what I was doing because those events horrified me. I was kind of shocked by them. And I thought, man, you better get political here and try to understand what's going on.
Right on.
And so that's what criticized me.
Cool. How did you come to socialism and communism?
Oh, like I said, I've been reading, I've been trying to study worldview since I was in my teens. And I was born and raised in a conservative family, and then just through instinct, I moved more toward the Democratic Party. And then I realized the Democratic Party wasn't doing much for me, so I became more of a progressive liberal. Um, and then I just kept going, I guess you could say, to the left. I kept going until eventually I discovered the Socialist Party of Great Britain, who provides a lot of educational content, and that's where I began to learn and discover what socialism was. And they there dispel a lot of myths about socialism. So, and the more I geared towards being in favor of the working class, the better I liked it. So that's how I came to be a socialist.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're great people over there, and I'm actually going to be interviewing them soon. But they put out a lot of good information, and I think they got the right approach to socialism. Can you? Who are some of your influences politically?
Politically, after the World Trade Center was struck and I wanted to educate myself, I discovered Noam Chomsky
Right on.
and Howard Zinn. So I would read their books. I went and bought their books, listened to their interviews. Noam Chomsky is very informative about U.S. foreign policy and was able to put a lot of information behind what my instincts were, that the United States was acting as an empire in the world. So, and he became one of my first influences. A lot of books I've read, I basically search for ideas, but my main influences at the time were Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn. And then eventually, like I said, I discovered the Socialist Party that provides a lot of educational content.
Great. Okay. So we're going to get into some of the ideas that you talk about in your TikToks, and that are, socialist, communist ideas. Can you speak a bit about a moneyless society?
Yeah. I discovered that what Karl Marx talked about was eventually societies are not fixed and static. They're always going to change, just like we went from hunter-gatherer society into a slave society, and then from slave society into feudalist society, and then from feudalist society into capitalist society. So he worked out that societies are always changing, and that eventually, after capitalism, will be a borderless world in which money and governments have been abolished. And we will work on a voluntary basis and use all the technology that has come in under previous societies to provide for what we need. And it will be a voluntary association of producers. And that's what Karl Marx talked about would be the next phase in human development.
Excellent. One TikTok that you have that I like a lot is the one where you dispel the myth of Marx's, how do I put it? His trajectory of socialism to communism. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Oh, yeah. When the Bolsheviks took over, they adopted the word communism, and it's been disastrous for people ever since, because what he really implemented capitalism, and that's just basically the state administering the capitalist system, the state being the employer, rather than a moneyless and stateless society. So I have a quote right here from Lenin in his book Impending Catastrophe and How to Combat It, from page 247, and he writes, socialism, quote, socialism is merely state capitalist monopoly which is made to serve the interest of the whole people, and has to that extent ceased to be a capitalist monopoly, unquote. And that's very different than how Marx quoted socialism from Capital Volume 2, in which he says that if we are to conceive of society as being not capitalistic, but communistic, there will be no money/capital at all in the first place. And that's vastly different than how Lenin defined socialism. There's another quote here from the Critique of the Gotha Program, where Marx writes that socialism has nothing to do with the state. And he writes, quote, "The whole program, for all its democratic claim, is tainted through and through by the Lassillian sect's servile belief in the state, or, what is no better, a democratic belief in miracles. Or rather, okay, I'm going to read the quote. Quote, "The whole program, for all its democratic claim, is tainted through and through by the Lassillian sect's servile belief in the state, or what is no better, a democratic belief in miracles, or rather, it is a compromise between these two kinds of belief in miracles, both equally remote from socialism." Unquote. So Marx would be rolling over in his grave right now if
Right.
all these people who are calling themselves Marxists were also talking about socialism being the capitalist system administered by the state. And Marx stateless society, also a moneyless society. So those are vastly two different views that people get confused.
Yes, absolutely. Can you please speak more about the stateless, classless society?
Sure, sure. Let me see if I have another quote here. A stateless, classless society is what comes after capitalism. It's basically a voluntary association of producers. Um, Work will be done on a voluntary basis. There will be no owners of the means of production by a tiny minority or even a state in control of the means of production. The Earth's resources, both technical resources and natural resources, will become the common heritage of everyone. And again, we will use the technology that has come in under the past 10,000 years and the various social systems that we have to accomplish this.
Excellent. Let's. You have a TikTok about personal property versus private property, and that also lends to what you were just saying. Can you talk about that?
Sure, sure. I think some people, when they have questions about socialism or communism, same thing to Marx, um, they're worried about whether or not they will be able to have any personal possessions of their own. Can anybody just come along and take what they have? And the answer is no. When you have a house, that house belongs to you. That's yours. That is your personal property. Your toothbrush, your clothing, your car, basically anything that you dwell in or dwells in you as a person belongs to you. Now, private property is more along the lines of like the railways or the farmlands or the factories, things that we need as a community to produce the things for which we need and transport these things. And when we use these things as a community to feed society and house society as a whole, those things will not be owned by a private individual. And so the elimination of private property is required to get rid of the state. But yet your personal property will belong to you.
Excellent. I'm going to pause it for a minute. So another thing that you mentioned is a leaderless and borderless society. Can you speak to that?
Sure, sure. Let's say approximately about 10,000 years ago, most of humanity was living on a borderless world, a borderless planet. And we were basically free to roam wherever we wanted to go. No permissions from any governments, no imaginary lines drawn. And then somewhere after the agricultural revolution, which is a prerequisite for what we like to call civilization that began in the Mesopotamia area, be, began to carve up the world into nation states. Eventually, we became countries, we became states within countries, cities, and these are all arbitrary lines. And a borderless, stateless world is basically going to be a return to, I guess, what we could call primitive communism, back when the world was borderless. Only now, that's how we're going to live with all the modern conveniences and technologies that have come in. There's going to be no more passports, no more asking governments for permission to travel, no more police or military officials coming to take your house away from failure of payment. It's basically just an overall better kind of freedom when we make the return to a borderless world.
Excellent. What about leaders? Don't we need them, though?
Leaders, no, leadership, I think leaders help sort of resolve problems and issues that really shouldn't exist. Like Martin Luther King is a leader, and he wanted to bring people out of racism. But, if there's no racism, what need do we have of a leader? We, as working people, will run society from the local to the regional to the state, and to the country on a democratic basis. We will make decision-making power based on what we need at the local level between ourselves. And so technically we don't need leaders. We can think for ourselves. We are capable of governing ourselves.
I love it. Absolutely. Okay. So just two more quick questions. Well, this next one isn't quick, but we'll get to it. It's can you speak to the revolution needed to bring about this new society?
Yeah. I think at first Karl Marx did write about the need for a bloody revolution, but like he did a lot of the times, he was working out his ideas and changed his mind. The revolution we need is one of a change in consciousness. We need to become aware of who we are as a working class within a capitalist system, and we need to come to the realization that we don't need top-down authority to run society. And then once a very clear majority of people throughout the world realize what socialism is, a voluntary association of producers to run society, that's the change that we need. That's the consciousness that needs to change so that we can bring about this change in society. Basically, it's about people getting in and voting in socialist delegates to the state apparatus so that we can start shutting down the state apparatus. And then after socialism has been established, the Socialist Party as a party ceases to be a political party. So we're basically politicians and a political party that doesn't want to be a political party.
Thank you. How can people follow you?
You can follow me as a socialist guy on Twitter, on TickTock, and then I have a page called Live Proletariat on Facebook. And some other great resources. The ones I turn to are the Socialist Party of Great Britain, the World Socialist Party US, the World Socialist Party Canada, and the World Socialist Party India. And so those are all great educational resources that people can research with and turn to if they are interested in socialism. And saying bye-bye to capitalism.
Exactly.
Problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're ready to say goodbye for good. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Dan. It was a pleasure. I look forward to having you back on the podcast soon. And like Dan said, everybody follow him at A Socialist Guy on TikTok.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.